Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining. I am Danny, originally from Santiago in Chile, but currently living in San Francisco. Um, Very happy to be here. And thank you to the Techqueria team for this amazing opportunity to speak a little bit about climate tech and nature tech, but from the perspective of emerging markets. Yeah, Chile. Um, But I'll tell you a little bit before I go into a couple of slides that I have to guide the conversation. Something that I would love about this session is that we make it super, super interactive. Feel free to drop any question or message in the chat as we go, and I'll do my best to keep track of it and answer any questions that come up. I only have like very, very few slides, and then we can open it up for questions also at the very end. A little bit about myself. As I said, I'm Chilean. I don't know if you interacted with Chilean Spanish, but it's horrible and full of slang. So I'll do my best to minimize my use of Chilenismos in this presentation. I'm super passionate about nature, which is something that I think is a little bit of a trend in Chile because we're very attuned and connected with nature. We're surrounded by mountains and oceans. Originally from Santiago, very big city, gives me a lot of LA vibes actually, Santiago. And in parallel with my passion for nature, entrepreneurship has been my avenue to tackle the climate crisis for the last 15 years. I really like working with very early stage ideas, trying to bring them forward and make them a reality. I would actually prefer working with a company that it's in its first 2 years of existence and with something that has already 10 years of existence and it's already growing. So I consider myself like an environmental entrepreneur. And I came to the Bay Area 4 years ago for grad school. And for me, it was a huge recognition and embracing of my Latino identity. I had never thought about it that much, but it was huge for me to see how there was a much bigger conversation here happening about that. So that's why I feel so especially excited about this invitation by the Techqueria folks. Okay, and today we're going to speak about a project I launched while still studying at Stanford that is called Reciprocal, that is all about promoting environmental innovation in Latin America and the Caribbean. Okay, can you see my screen okay? If anybody can confirm, that would be great. Hey, thanks, Kevin. Reciprocal is a planetary health venture studio. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what that is. That is focused on promoting innovation that comes from Latin America, but that impacts the world. The story of that is that when I came to the Bay Area, it was to Stanford in the middle of Silicon Valley, and it was the middle of the climate tech 2.0 boom around 2020, 2021. I was burned out from startups, didn't want to do anything else with that. But everybody here was talking about climate tech and nature tech and all the huge opportunities that were presenting themselves in this space. And something that happened to me is this insight that these conversations were happening in the wrong place. In my opinion, we should bring all this climate tech and nature tech energy from places like Silicon Valley, but to areas where climate change is being felt the most, like Latin America and the Caribbean, where I'm from. So I started thinking, what would need to happen for environmental innovation to become more of a thing in places like Lima in Peru, Bogota in Colombia, Sao Paulo in Brazil, Santiago, Central America, etc. And that led me to launch Reciprocal. It goes without saying that Latin America and the Caribbean are very uniquely positioned to tackle climate change because, in my view, as I said, the places that are suffering from the problems the most are better positioned to solve them. So it's not only a great opportunity to do environmental innovation in Latin America with all of our natural endowments and biodiversity and talented people, but it's also extremely necessary. We are disproportionately affected by climate change. There's a huge climate adaptation necessity in the region that we need to tackle. And I think that if we were to combine these two things, LATAM could become a powerhouse of environmental innovation from which solutions can be born and then solve problems all over the world, not only in Latin America. And I'm not the only one in saying this. This has been recognized by some folks in the space that do climate innovation and do climate investments. Matt and Garrett are two colleagues of mine. They work in ocean-related innovation in the case of Matt, and biotech-related startups in the case of Garrett. And it was amazing to see that they were both recognizing that LATAM offers this very special sort of like petri dish of entrepreneurs, problems that need to be tackled, great market opportunities, but they all share the perspective that there was something a bit missing. Like we have all the elements, but something is not necessarily coalescing in a way that we could achieve this vision of the powerhouse that I was talking about. After a lot of work, research, interviews, showing up, working with entrepreneurs in the region, I think there's four things that, if present, they are enablers, but currently, since they're not there yet, they act a bit as blocking conditions for this vision to be achieved. First, talent, I think we have that one. LATAM has one of the best universities in the world, and also Latinos across the world are also joining amazing research institutions or academic institutions or companies. And I think we don't have to convince anybody that people that identify as Latino or come from Latin America are extremely talented, smart, resourceful. So I think that's a check. But there were some missing pieces that I think needed to be addressed to unlock this potential. First, better connecting the community of climate innovators and environmental innovators. Entrepreneurship is extremely hard, and it's very, very dependent on sharing lessons and knowledge among people that work in the space. And I realized that people that did that for the environment didn't necessarily have access to community or somebody to ask them to ask a question or support each other. Second, we have a huge gap in capital that is being allocated towards climate solutions in LATAM. I don't know if you know this, but something that I never forgot after I learned it is that Latin America and the Caribbean receive less than 4% of global climate investments, which is a complete mismatch no matter how you look at it. If you look at it through GDP, population, natural endowments, that number should be much bigger. And third, there's a perception that Latin America and the Caribbean are a risky place to make investments because of economic reasons or political reasons. So if you combine those things, there is a lack of solutions that are coming out. Entrepreneurs don't have that much support or resources to move their ideas forward. Investors that do want to invest in the region complain that they don't have enough pipeline. But everybody agrees that the elements are there, right? Like LATAM should be this powerhouse. We are missing these things, but what can we do to change the scenario and move this forward? That's where we came in, and that's something that we want to unlock with Reciprocal. Very hands-on. We say that we are building the solutions from the environment for the environmental crisis from the front lines, which is LATAM. We want to connect the dots and sort of like, instead of looking at each other with these shared diagnostics of the potential, doing something to change the scenario and actually achieve this vision that I was outlining before. But how do we do it? I think that's the key question. The innovation in our model and where the venture studio concept comes in is that we operate at a space that nobody else is operating for environmental entrepreneurship, which is what we call the ideation and support gap. This is a generalization, but if you're an entrepreneur that already sort of developed an idea that's better structured, that you even have some sort of initial validation, you can tap into incubators, accelerators, or early stage investors that then take you forward in this journey of entrepreneurship. But in our opinion, what's missing is supporting the people that are facing the first valley of death, which is when you decide to actually take a stab at it. Go join an entrepreneurial journey, you have a crazy idea, you want to test it, but you don't know how. And I think that's the spot that where we're missing insane amounts of talent and ideas and that's exactly where we want to operate. We think if we unlock that ideation and support gap, we're in a way gonna release the floodgates of environmental entrepreneurs in Latam that can then operate along this pipeline and keep on connecting with whoever comes after us. And that was extremely innovative because it sounds extremely simple, but I think people shy away from operating at that stage because there is this perception that solutions are just going to be generated out of the blue and entrepreneurs are going to find a way of getting there. Or even this conception that only the most smart ones will be able to do that. Or the best ideas are going to be able to survive that. But in my view, in the case of emerging markets, and especially in a topic that's very complex like climate, that's not the case. The ones that survive that first valley of death tend to have some sort of unfair access to networks, unfair access to capital, and they're not necessarily the best ideas or the best founders. It's just that we're missing something that support those founders at the early stages so that they can then keep on growing their startups or their business ideas. So that's where we want to operate earlier than before. And this is a bit crazy. Sometimes we work with entrepreneurs that haven't even incorporated a company. They just have an idea on a whiteboard and we help them develop it and move it forward. So what we do very concretely in Reciprocal is three things. We call it the build, support, invest model. First of all, we build companies ourselves. And that's where being a venture studio comes. That is what is different between a venture studio and a venture capital fund. Venture studios include in their mandate the capacity to create solutions themselves. There are many ways of doing that. We like to partner with entrepreneurs very early on, as I said before, and act as a very resourceful institutional co-founder in order to move their ideas forward. That's why venture studios sometimes are also called venture builders. We've done this with 2 companies already. I'm going to tell you more about it later. But this is our bread and butter, building solutions in the trenches with the entrepreneurs and break that sort of first mover bias where everybody's looking at each other saying like, oh yeah, actually we should do something. Our approach and our model is like, okay, but let's go, let's build it. Second, and this is also super important in an ecosystem of entrepreneurship that is not fully developed, we do supporting activities to anybody that wants to play a role in environmental innovation in Latam, but needs some sort of assistance. That could be regional actors like startups or governments or funds. For example, a couple of months ago, I hosted a delegation of climate startups in San Francisco, connecting them with the ecosystem here, helping them reach clients or investors. Or we're working with some others that see us as a bridge from Latin America to the rest of the world. But likewise, we are in very exciting conversations with international organizations that want to do work in Latam, but they don't know how. And they see us as a bridge in the other direction. So, for example, we became the regional scouts of an organization that invests in nature-based solutions and wanted to, of course, do something in Latam, but didn't have the networks or the knowledge or the sort of cultural identity to do so. And in less than 3 months, we've helped map over 150 opportunities for them, which is extremely exciting because they have the willingness to support. These nature-based solutions need that support, but there was a huge disconnect that we're bridging. So we build our own companies, we support the ecosystem with acceleration programs, soft landing, technical assistance, etc. And then the last thing that we're doing is structuring our own investment vehicles that unlocks the capital these programs or these startups need. I do dream of Reciprocal having its own climate or nature fund in the future. That's a very long-term project for us. We are taking small steps in that direction, like doing our first initial investments, but that's the vision. And we think that This capital is required to scale ideas to a larger level, especially in climate, which tends to have a lot of solutions that are more asset heavy, that need that money, that are more R&D heavy. So if you don't unlock the investment side of things, you're always going to fall short. That's why we were very conscious in including an investment arm into what Reciprocal is doing. So if you ever wonder what we do, we call ourselves a venture studio, but we do these three things. We build companies, we support the environmental innovation ecosystem in Latam, and we create investment vehicles to allocate that capital towards the solutions and the places that need it. So let me tell you about our first couple of companies, which are like what excites me the most. We did this in the last year. The first one is called Coral. That's a picture of Tamara, the CEO. She's an incredible woman biotechnologist that lives in the south of Chile in Patagonia. And she realized that there was a huge seaweed boom. A lot of people were interested in putting seaweed farms in the south of Chile, but they were struggling to sell it. Okay, now if I grow the seaweed, what happens next? Because they thought a lot of innovators were just going to buy the raw seaweed, but that's not the case. They need very specific functional ingredients. And she leveraged her biotechnology background to turn raw seaweed into the ingredients other companies need, filling a key missing link in the supply chain. And Coral, in a year and a half, has been accepted into international acceleration programs, has been receiving non-dilutive funding, and is preparing for its first seed round. So as you see, we're doing that early stage support that then allows us to pass the baton to other actors in the ecosystem that are waiting for these solutions to be there. And also less technical or less businessy, it has been awesome to work with Tammy personally too. Like as she approaches her personal journey as a woman entrepreneur that had a lot of doubts about how to reconcile her maternity with her positionality as a founder, for example. And that's the type of barrier that could hold back an entrepreneurial journey of somebody extremely talented if they don't have the initial support of somebody that says, actually, it can be done. Let me connect you with these three other female founders that they are all mothers and they can tell you their experience, and then you can figure out if this is something that you still want to do or not. That's the type of also intangible value that working very early on with our model provides. Our second portfolio company is called Phoenix. They turn waste biomass from agriculture and forest, like trimmings and unused wood and things like that. They turn that into biochar. That's an input for increasing soil health, capturing carbon, and other amazing co-benefits. So that's why they call Phoenix, because they turned from ashes, from this biomass, they create value. With the analogy of Phoenix being reborn. There are two guys that are extremely knowledgeable in organic waste management. They're extremely technical. They have scientific backgrounds, but they didn't necessarily know how to use all that energy and all that knowledge into something that's more of like an entrepreneurial pursuit. So that's also an example of wasted talent that wouldn't have been able to pursue an entrepreneurial journey if you weren't for somebody that says like, okay, now you want to use this for the purposes of a startup. This is what it looks like. Let us help you prepare your first meeting with a potential investor. These are the difference between being a consultant and being the CEO of a startup. Luckily, they thrived in that journey. So as we have these two, we want to finish next year with a couple more. In terms of the programs that we're working on, we are in the design phase of an accelerator for startups that work in the Amazon bioregion. We are also preparing a blue economy program. So if there are any ocean folks in the audience, stay tuned for that. And we want to keep on nurturing this community and demonstrating to the world that from Latin America, great things can come out. We're not just an importer of technology or an importer of solution, but if we enable these talented folks, we can be a source of those solutions too. So it's been amazing to see the reaction of this narrative in places like San Francisco or New York Climate Week, where we hosted an event a couple of weeks ago, showcasing the strong entrepreneurial narratives from Latino founders that we want to keep on expanding. Of course, none of this would be possible without an incredible team behind us. We have been very lucky to nurture a huge community of designers, entrepreneurs, finance people, technical people. So if you want to help out in some capacity using your skills, please do reach out. Before I move forward, I see a picture and I promised this was gonna, I see a question and I promised this was gonna be interactive. So Scar Denise, you're asking, you're confused about funding and investment when my ideas are focused on a social good and not on providing stakeholder value. The idea is needed because it's a valid climate solution, but it's not a profitable investment. That's a huge question. I think a lot of people feel that way. But I would say that investment is not a monolith. You can find, I think the term is like return profiles of different investors. So you can think of it as a spectrum. On one side of the spectrum, you're going to have investors that expect market returns or even better. They're in it for the money, even if it's climate. And on the other side of the spectrum, you could have, let's say, pure philanthropy, somebody that's willing to give you the money and never see a return on it, but they believe in your solution. And in between, there's a lot of different flavors to investment and funding. So I would think about what is your capacity to generate any income, if any, or because some ideas that don't create market returns, for example, receive a recoverable grant. That's a term that's very top of mind nowadays. They give you a grant, and only if you meet certain milestones, you give it back. Maybe that's a potential idea for something like what you're working on. And thanks for the question. And I just want to end up saying that this is not only possible because of the team, but also because of the ecosystem we're building. There's a million organizations that we're trying to connect, people that do environment but don't do LATAM, people that do LATAM but don't do environment, people in between, governments, public sector, private sectors, etc. So there's a lot of ecosystem building here. So with that, I know we just have a couple of extra minutes, but I want to finish with some thoughts. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and we can move it to like Q&A as we go. So first, as I said, if you're working in an emerging market and ecopreneurship, I think we need a little bit of a push. We need help. We need more support, especially early on, challenging this notion that entrepreneurs just need to survive and hustle. That's something that we're trying to demonstrate. Second, to my point about this being all about an ecosystem, we need to recognize interdependence. And something that I think stands out between Latin American or Latino-related ventures is that we're all about radical collaboration, and that moves us forward. And this was actually mentioned explicitly during New York Climate Week. I think that's something that everybody shares in the space. And third, that this is extremely hard. Being an entrepreneur is already hard, but that's not the point. It's also very fun, very rewarding, and very much needed. So that's why we're doing it. So with that, feel free to drop your questions and reach out if you want to be a founder, you're thinking about an idea, you want to help a founder, and you think you have a skill that could be put to the service of the work that we're doing, or if you want to partner up, if you want to have an organization that resonates with what I just said, please send me a message, and I would love to connect and know more. So with that, thank you. Yeah, I would love to see if you have any questions or any thoughts. So drop them in the chat. Kevin, your question, is there any network to join to find climate startups? Yeah, there's two that come to mind. And thank you, Danny, for your encouragement. One is called climatebase.org. They actually do a fellowship that I really recommend. If you're like thinking about climate, that fellowship is a great fit. The other one is called terra.do. I just dropped them in the chat. They both offer sort of like a job portal, but also fellowships for people that want to sort of like test the waters in climate tech and nature tech. They're great resources. It's not that much for Latin America specific, this is something that we're thinking about. Maybe one day we'll have the capacity of doing it, but if not, I'll point you towards those two. Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you, Tani, for the feedback. Does anybody else have any questions or thoughts that they would like to share? Also, thank again for the Techqueria team and all the shout outs and picking up on the notes. Oh, Daniela, thanks for your comment. We'd love to know more about where you're coming from with that comment, but I see those terms and I resonate a lot. I think an sort of undiscussed benefit or impact of the model that we're pushing forward is that we are democratizing the access to environmental entrepreneurship. I hope my examples show that. It's like by providing support very early on where nobody else is doing, we are enabling people that wouldn't necessarily be an environmental entrepreneur to actually pursue that journey. And that could be people with Latinx identities, women, youth, LGBTQ, etc. That's a huge part of why we exist. Okay, folks, and thanks for everything. I think I'm correct. We are at time, but it was a huge pleasure to present. Thank you again to all the Techqueria folks. I'll hang in there for a couple of extra minutes if anybody has an extra question. If not, thanks for joining. You're welcome, Kevin, and thank you, Daniela, and it's on you. Thank you, Techqueria team. You're great. Good luck with the rest of the summit. I'm trying to join some of the sessions. Okay, folks. Thank you, everybody who joined, and thank you for all the great questions. Please reach out. We'd love to keep on having this conversation with more people and spread the word about Reciprocal about Latin American environmental innovators. There's amazing things happening there. So thanks for the opportunity. And see you next time.